The 115th New York Volunteer Infantry Regiment, nicknamed the Iron-Hearted Regiment, was a volunteer regiment recruited during the American Civil War from the counties of Fulton, Hamilton, Montgomery, and Saratoga, New York. History. Content. In writing the history of the 115th N.Y. Volunteer Infantry, we record the acts of a noble body of men, whose deeds are already written in blood, and inscribed high up in the roll of fame. THS Regiment was raised in the counties of Saratoga, Montgomery, Fulton, and Hamilton, and mustered into the United States service on the 26th day of August, 1862, by Captain Edgerton, USA, at Fonda, the place of rendezvous of the regiment. The field staff and captains were as follows. Officers of the 115th N.Y. Volume, Regiment Salmons, Colonel Simeon Batchellia, Lieutenant Colonel George S. Cowan, Major Patrick Henry Horton, Adjutant Thomas R. McMartin, Quartermaster Martin Sutton, Sergeant Richard H. Ingersoll, Assistant Surgeon William H. Clemens, Chaplain Sylvester V. Captains. Company A. Garrett Vanderveer. Company B. John P. Kneeskrn. Company C. William H. McKittrick. Company D. Sidney Lincoln Filter. Company E. William H. Shaw. Company F. Walton W. French. Company G. Egbert B. Savage. Company H. Solomon P. Smith. Company I. Israel Walrath. Company K. William Smith. With the above officers, together with a full complement of lieutenants and 140 enlisted men, the regiment broke camp at Fonda on the 29th day of August, and was forwarded to the seat of war as soon as possible, arriving at Dandy Hook, MD, on the Baltimore and Ohio on the 1st of Sept, where the regiment was furnished with arms, but very little ammunition. It then moved on to Harper's Ferry, Virginia, where it was assigned to guard duty along the Shenandoah Valley with headquarters at Charlestown, Virginia. The regiment performed guard duty faithfully until a few days before the surrender of Harper's Ferry, when it and others were ordered to concentrate at that place. On the way to the ferry, James English, a member of Co. D, was wounded in the hand by the accidental discharge of a musket, necessitating amputation at the wrist. He was the first man wounded in the regiment. On arriving at or near Harper's Ferry, the regiment was encamped on Bolivar Heights, in the rear of the village. For this point it performed picket duty, and while so engaged, John Hubbard, of Co. A, was wounded by guerrilla. On the 12th, Companies E and A were ordered to report to Col. Tom Ford, in command of Maryland Heights, and upon doing so, were ordered to proceed up the Potomac to the old John Brown schoolhouse, and form a skirmish line from the river as far up the mountain as possible, the left resting on the river. Early the next morning the two companies were ordered back to Ford's headquarters, and from the to Elk Ridge, at the lookout, on the highest peak of the mountain. Here for the first time members of the 115th Regiment met the enemy in deadly combat. After several hours fighting and holding the position, the two companies were ordered to evacuate the place and report to Gen. Miles' headquarters, which they did very reluctantly, and not until they had received the third order. Company E had one man wounded. About this time Company K moved up, and in a few minutes its captain was carried to the rear, having been wounded in the thigh by a Minnie ball. Upon nearing the foot of the mountain, at what was known as Maryland Heights, Companies E and A met the remainder of the regiment, who congratulated them upon the safe return. the regiment returned to camp on Bolivar Heights. The troops were kept moving to and fro until the morning of the 5th, when General Miles made one of the most cowardly and disgraceful surrenders recorded in the annals of American history. 11,000 men, armed and equipped in the best style, with plenty of ammunition, holding one of the most defensible positions in the United States, were ignominiously surrendered, instead of aiding to surround Lee's Longstreet's hills and Jackson's Corps where there was no possible way of escape. Thus the Union Army was reduced, and 11,000 as good fighting men as ever shielded a musket were doomed to bear the taunts of their enemies, at home and abroad, as Harper's Ferry cowards. But every regiment that was obliged to participate in that farce, and whose honor was sold by the commanding officer, has, upon bloody fields, won bright laurels, and vindicated its soldierly character, by the good graces of the rebel generals, who had the captured army as an elephant on the hands. The prisoners were paroled the next day, and allowed to depart in peace, which they did with sorrowing hearts. The regiment returned to Annapolis, Maryland, and thence went to Chicago, where it went into camp on the Cook County Fairground, which was called Camp Tyler, after the general in command of the troops around the city. During the stay of the 115th in Chicago, its duties were about the same as those of troops in garrison, but the men were allowed rather more liberties than regular soldiers on duty. While at Chicago, the weather being very bad most of the time, and the men not on fatigue duty enough to give them healthy exercise, malarial fever caused the death of quite a number. About the 20th of November, 1862, the regiment was ordered to proceed to Washington. The capital was reached about the 23d, and at the same time the soldiers of the 115th were exchanged and marched over to Arlington Heights. They were supposed to go into winter quarters, but by the time quarters were built the regiment was ordered out again, and kept in motion between Arlington, Fairfax, Hunters Creek, Alexandria, and Yorktown, where it embarked on the steamer Matanzas, January 23d, 1863, and arrived at Hilton Head, SC, Department of the South, about the 26th of January. Here the regiment was divided into detachments for post-camp and outpost duty. Companies E and D were detailed to garrison Battery Mitchell, an outpost on Skull Creek. Company B was stationed at Saybrook, and other companies at different points on and around Hilton Head Island, until the 28th of May, when the different detachments were relieved and the regiment was again a unit at Hilton Head. On the 2d of June, Companies E and B were, by order of General Chatfield, detailed for special field duty, and went with other troops up May River, SC, and burned the town of Bluffton. About the 27th of June, the regiment was moved to the city of Beaufort, SC, some 12 miles up Beaufort River, where it went into camp. After remaining here a while and suffering severely from malaria incident to the dull routine life of the camp, the regiment was again divided into detachments and sent to do outpost and picket duty on Beaufort, Port Royal, and other islands adjacent to them. On the 20th of December, the regiment embarked on transports for the old camp at Hilton Head, where it was attached to Gen. T. Seymour's ill-starred Florida expedition. The force left Hilton Head on the 5th of February, 1864, reached Jacksonville on the evening of the 7th, and occupied the city without opposition. During the night of the 8th, the expedition reached Camp Finnegan, about 12 miles from Jacksonville, capturing a battery of 6 guns, a quantity of small arms, etc., and a large amount of provisions, upon which the boys feasted until next day, when, with well-filled haversacks, they moved towards Tallahassee, reaching and occupying Baldwin without opposition, and reaching Barber's plantation during the night. The next day the troops advanced to Sanderson's Station, where they burned the railroad depot filled with corn, and several resin and turpentine manufactories, and tore up considerable railroad track, burning ties and other property belonging to the rebels. By order of Gen. Seymour, the army fell back to Barber's plantation and remained there until the 19th. During this time the 115th, a part of the 4th Massachusetts Cavalry and a section of the 3rd Flying Artillery were ordered to proceed to Callahan, a station on the Fernandina and Cedar Keys Railroad, and capture whatever they might find, which was 1 pony, 7 bushels of sweet potatoes, and 1 or 2 Florida hogs, of the kind that need to have knots tied in the tails to prevent the getting through cracks. Returning to camp weary, footsore and hungry, the boys of the 115th were allowed to rest about 1 day, when the whole command broke camp early on the morning of the 20th for the disastrous field of Olustee, known by the rebels as Ocean Pond. Upon arriving on the field, the order of battle was formed, with the 115th on the extreme right of the infantry line, and the troops ordered to move forward, which they did with a steadiness that showed the 15,000 rebels that they had work to do. Upon arriving on a rise of ground between where the line was formed and the rebel position, the advancing force received a murderous fire, at which the colored troops on the extreme left broke very badly. The white troops upon the left began to double up on the 115th, but order was soon restored. About this time the rebels made a charge upon the Union right, which was repulsed by the 115th, who sent the enemy back over the works with heavy loss. The combat continued to rage with fury until the supply of ammunition on both sides gave out, and night coming on, both parties were willing to call it a drawn battle, but Gen. Seymour, by ordering a retreat, gave the rebels to understand that he abandoned the contest. Upon this occasion Gen. Seymour took occasion to publicly compliment the 115th, giving it the honor and praise of saving his little army from total annihilation, and naming it the Hearted Regiment. The regiment lost over 1/2 its number in killed, wounded and missing. Colonel Salmons was wounded in the foot at the commencement of the battle. Captain Vanderveer was mortally wounded, and died in a few days. Lefts Tompkins and Schaffer were killed, besides many of the best non-commissioned officers and men. On leaving Olustee, the expedition retraced its steps toward Jacksonville, where the 115th did picket and camp duty until February 9th, when the force embarked on transports for Palatka, FLA, about 100 miles up the St. Johns River from Jacksonville. Here the troops rested, and nothing of interest transpired. On the 4th of April they again embarked on transports for Hilton Head, S.C., making a few hours' stop at Jacksonville, and arriving at their destination on the evening of the 16th. On the 18th the regiment sailed for Gloucester Point, Virginia, reaching the place on the 21st, and was attached to the 10th Army Corps. On May 4th it was attached to the Army of the James under Gen. B.F. Butler. The army moved up the James River to Bermuda Hundred, and on the 7th of May the 115th participated and suffered severely in the ill-fated Battle of Chesterfield Heights, Virginia, losing about 80 in killed, wounded and missing. From this time to the 16th of May the regiment was marching, fighting, picketing, etc. On the morning of the day the disastrous Battle of Drury's Bluff was fought, and the 115th Regiment again brought into requisition under the immediate supervision of Gen. Adelbert Ames, who complimented it for its bravery and skillful movements which saved Butler's army from total rout. On the 17th the regiment went into camp at Hatcher's Run. For this time it was on picket duty all the time to the 28th, when it marched to City Point, and embarked on board the steamer de Mole for White House, Virginia, landing there on the 31st at 4 p.m. The 115th took up the line of march for Cold Harbor, Virginia, reaching the place June 1 at 3:30 p.m., and immediately, with the rest of the brigade, charged the enemy's works. This regiment capturing 250 men with their arms and equipment. Here the regiment was again complimented for bravery by Gen. Devens. For that time to the 12th, the regiment was under a continuous fire day and night. During the night of the 12th it marched for White House Landing, which place was reached at 6 a.m. of the 13th. Next day the regiment embarked for City Point, landed at Powhatan on the James, and marched the rest of the way. On the 23rd it moved up in front of Petersburg, Virginia. For this time the regiment was in the trenches before Petersburg beat to July 29, when Gen. Turner's division, to which the 115th was attached, moved to the left, to assist Burnside's 9th Corps in the explosion of the mine, and charge upon the enemy's works. This occurred at 5 o'clock on the morning of the 30th of July. Here, again, the 115th displayed its courage and cool bravery by standing as a wall of fire between the advancing rebels and the partially demoralized 9th Corps, and was again complimented by both Gens. Burnside and Turner. From Petersburg the regiment marched to near City Point, and then to Bermuda Hundred, losing several men by sunstroke, as the weather was extremely hot, and the roads dry and dusty. Up to this time the regiment had been under fire for 37 days, and needed rest, which was had at Hatch's Farm, until, on the evening of the 13th of August, the regiment broke camp and marched to Deep Bottom, on the north side of the James River, which was reached at 7 o'clock a.m. on the 14th. That day and the next were occupied in marching and counter-marching. On the 16th the enemy were found strongly posted at Charles City Courthouse, where fighting began at once and continued until the evening of the 18th, when the 115th was deployed and covered the retreat of the Union forces. In this affair the regiment lost 84 killed, wounded and missing. On the 20th it returned to the old camp at Bermuda, with only 120 men fit for duty. Comparative rest was the happy lot of the decimated regiment until the 28th, when it marched to Petersburg again and occupied the trenches in front of that city. The regiment had a little rest, doing only trench and camp duty until the 28th of September, when it broke camp and marched to the north side of the James. On the 29th the 115th participated in the capture of two redoubts on Chaffin's Farm, known by some as Spring Hill. Here the losses of the regiment were very severe, among the dead being the loved and lamented Captain W. H. McKittrick of Co. C. During this engagement in charges, countercharges, victories and repulses, the enemy lost 3 times the number that the 115th did. For this time to October 27th the regiment was doing picket duty most of the time. On the day a reconnaissance was made in force on the Derby Town Road, in front of Richmond, the 115th taking a prominent part in charging the rebel works, and losing quite heavily. Among the number killed was Sergeant L.D.E. of Company F, the idol of his comrades. Returning to camp, the regiment had 5 days comparative rest. On the 8th of December, the 115th embarked on board the propeller Hayes, and participated in the abortive attempt to capture Fort Fisher, N.C. In the afternoon of December 30, the regiment debarked at Jones Landing, on the James River, Virginia, and just after dark was again in the old camp on Chaffin's Farm. On January 4, 1865, the 115th again embarked on board the propeller, the Molly, on its second expedition against the keystone of the Confederacy. The whole force was under command of Gen. Alfred H. Terry. The troops landed at Flay Pond Battery, a short distance north of Fort Fisher, on the 13th at 9 a.m. The 115th lost but 2 or 3 men in landing. At 3 p.m. of the 15th, her charge was made upon the fort, the 115th bearing a noble part in its capture, and being again complimented by General Terry, also by Gen. Ames, who knew something of its fighting qualities while in the Army of the James. The loss to the regiment was about 70, and among the killed was Lieutenant S.S. Olney, of Co. F., whose loss to the regiment and company could not be made good. At about 8 o'clock on the morning of the 16th, one of the magazines of the fort exploded, killing and wounding more of this regiment than the fighting of the day before. For this time to the surrender of Johnson's rebel army, the 115th was continually employed in fighting, marching, picket and guard duty, until it reached Raleigh, N.C., where it was assigned to safeguard duty in the city from April 23 to June 17, when it was mustered out of service. On the 19th, the regiment left Raleigh for Albany, NY, where it was paid off by Paymaster C. F. Davis on the 6th of July 1865, there being something less than 200 of the original members. Upon leaving the U.S. service, the men quietly returned to their homes and former vocations, and today the old 115th N.Y. The Volunteer Infantry is represented in nearly every state in the Union, and almost every calling in life. However humble or exalted they may now be, if you speak of the camp, the bivouac, the fatigue, the march, the picket, the fight, and the campfires of years gone by, their eyes will kindle, and at the fireside they fight the battles o'er and o'er, until one could almost hear the roar of musketry, and the bursting of shells. But we must stop, for we can add nothing to the laurels already wreathed around the brow of one of the best of our country's defenders, the 115th Regiment, New York Volunteer Infantry. It only remains to add the following list of battles which were participated in by the regiment, or a part of it. Battles engaged in by the 115th NY Volunteer Infantry. Battle date: Maryland Heights, September 13, 1862. Bolivar Heights, Virginia, September 15, 1862. West Point, Virginia, January 8, 1863. Jacksonville, Florida, February 7, 1864. Camp Finnegan, FLA, Feb. 8, 1864. Baldwin, FLA, February 9, 1864. Sanderson, FLA, February 11, 1864. Callahan Station, FLA, February 14, 1864. Olustee, FLA, February 20, 1864. Palatka, FLA, March 10, 1864. Bermuda 100, Virginia, May 5, 1864. Chesterfield Heights, Virginia, May 7, 1864. Old Church, Virginia, May 9, 1864. Weir Bottom Church, Virginia, May 12, 1864. Drury's Bluff, Virginia, May 14, 1864. Proctor's Creek and Amport Walt Hall, Virginia, May 16, 1864. Cold Harbor, Virginia, June 1, 1864. Chickahominy, Virginia, June 1, 1864. Petersburg, Virginia, June 23, 1864. Burnside Mine, Virginia, July 30, 1864. Deep Bottom, Virginia, August 16 to 8, 1864. Fort Gilmer, Virginia, September 29, 1864. Darbytown Road, Virginia, October 27, 1864. Fort Fisher, NC, December 25, 1864. Fort Fisher, NC, January 15, 1865. Fort Anderson, NC, February 19, 1865. Sugarloaf Battery, NC, Feb. 20, 1865. Wilmington, NC, February 22, 1865. The 115th brought out of the war 6 flags, which Col. Salmons, in behalf of the regiment, presented to the state. The National Ensign, a gift of the ladies of the 15th Senatorial District, August 20, 1862, showed service, the staff and 3/5 of the flag being gone. The regimental banner, presented by the state authorities while the regiment was at Fonda, of silk, with eagle and shield in the center, the national motto in a scroll beneath, and 34 stars in the field above, bearing the inscription 115th NY. Volume. Regiment Infantry, came out rent in the center and torn from side to side. A second and similar regimental banner survived in better condition, and with it was a new national flag inscribed with the names of the regiment's battles, also 2 guidons of bunting. These flags were turned over to the Adjutant General. They are represented by Lieutenant Col. N.J. Johnson, and are carried by a CRGT. James English, who lost an arm while supporting them in the field. Information cited from the Montgomery County, New York official website, which was derived from the History of Montgomery and Fulton Counties by F. W. Beers, 1878.